Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Glue Stick channel. So today I will be rambling along the subject of magic items, particularly sentient or intelligent magic items. First, what does the official literature have to say on the matter? Let's take a look at the Roll20.net and their entry on the Compendium of Rules and Guidelines hosted there, which is an extremely good resource you can access anywhere you have an internet connection, by the way, for free. 2 thumbs up from me. Okay, so sentient magic items. I will read this section to you with some of my own observations. Such is my way. Some magic items possess sentience and personalities. Such an item may be possessed, haunted by the spirit of a previous owner, or self-aware thanks to the magic used to create it. My first interjection here comes pretty soon. So, I wish they went into more detail on the magic used to create it. Previously, I've talked about various ways this might happen, such as the wizard, artificer, cleric, or arcanist using their own mind as a template for a magically constructed personality. For example, say I was creating a magic axe that was enchanted to fly around and attack on its own. This weapon needs some kind of special guidance system, otherwise it's going to go crazy. Just haywire. So what better than the intelligence nature bestowed on me already? Why reinvent the wheel? So I think like a weapon. I put myself into the correct mindset as if I were the magical flying axe. I don't want to harm anything but those who are enemies of whoever is commanding me, but I'm filled with furious energy. When I have my mood and my intentions exactly right, pow! I take a magic, psychic snapshot of my own mind and imprint it onto the weapon. Not my memories or my full emotional spectrum, just that specific mindset designed and imprinted for that specific purpose. Thus, the axe is not a whole personality, and it is never going to change in its basic mental attitude. It's happy to be doing what it was made to do, because that's exactly what the imprint feels, what the creator was deliberately feeling at the time. Does this have the capacity to grow and learn? Does it have a set number of names it can even recognize of people that it's not supposed to attack? Could it be just like, hello Lord George, hello Harry, hello, oh, who are you? I've never seen you before, but it's somebody that they met yesterday. It's just exceeded its quota. Does it really think or act or just react in a very organic way, but a programmed one nonetheless? Imagine having a conversation with this snapshot of a mind. I think it would be interesting at first, but really you would quickly realize that it's not a whole mind in that thing that you're dealing with. It has a name, it can furnish basic communication, but it's only interested in being a flying axe and chopping things that are not its allies. So it's always going to ask who it can and can't chop, and it will always be very keen to get into the flying and the chopping. I would think that this would be one of the easiest, most practical, and most useful ways to make a sentient magic item. It can't really go wrong unless you're some apprentice who didn't have the right mindset when you made the snapshot and you've imprinted some shopping list onto a magic item or something. And it certainly would be the most common with few problems involved. Also, there is very little chance that this kind of insentience is going to run into problems. It never really changes. It's just like an endlessly cycling loop of specific thoughts. It will never question its reason for existing, kind of like an animated GIF or GIF. The other option is trapping a soul or imprinting the entire mind of a sentient being, or making an entire copy of a living being's whole mind and running it within the arcane matrix of the item, something which I consider would be an ethical violation, really. In this case, the item behaves like a character, complete with personality, quirks, ideals, bonds, and sometimes flaws. A sentient item might be a cherished ally to its wielder or a continual thorn in the side. This is all well and good, but it is making a huge assumption, and that is that this must be the mind of some humanoid spellcaster similar to whoever is using it. Oh, really? So the Aboleth never made magic items. The giants never trapped the minds of dragons inside magic items. The mind flayers never trapped the souls of their victims or rebels inside magic items for all eternity. The Modrons never attempted to store the engrams of a rogue quadrone companion inside a magic item in order to preserve it. A banshee never got trapped inside a magic item used to destroy it. There are a million ways that this could be oh so very weird and unexpectedly awesome. So what would it be like using a trident that was intended only to be used by crazy Kuatoa? What if the item was this thing and it actually loathes living humanoids and creatures to the point that it actually goes out of its way to try to get them killed? Food for thought, but moving on. Most sentient items are weapons. Other kinds of items can manifest sentience, but consumable items such as potions and scrolls are never sentient. Okay, I take issue with that word never. Tell me a particular individual. What if the potion was actually useful in some way? Say an old sage who knows a lot of very important lore on something critically important to the characters. Is it worth losing all that lore just to bring back the companion from the dead right now? Or should they just bring the body back and do it later? What if there is a sentient vial of poison? Can you imagine how much fun some evil sentient poison could possibly be? How about a scroll with nothing written on it, but the scroll itself assures you, oh yes, I have a spell written on me or within me. You can't see it. I won't let you know what it is, but when the time is right, I will cast it myself. Do you trust the scroll? What if there are a big bunch of them and they're actually just some illusionist trick to overburden would-be thieves? Never say never in Dungeons & Dragons is my advice. Sentient magic items function as NPCs under the GM's control, or the DM's control. Any activated property of the item is under the item's control, not the wielder's, as long as the wielder maintains a good relationship with the item. The wielder can access the properties normally. If the relationship is strained, the item can suppress its activated abilities or even turn them against the wielder. I would advise, personally, that this be done sparingly, as grumpy and useless items are just going to get gotten rid of by the players in short order, unless there's something else about the item that compels them to decide otherwise, and that is very much where the background and story of the item comes into play. Who made this item? Where are they from and what were they? Did they make this item and how did it end up here? How was it made? Now it's been found and it's active again, who might be interested in it? What possible motives could this item have that the players are not yet aware of? Is there more to this item than meets the eye? Or more to the weapon or item than its sentient personality is letting the players know about? Can this item actually grow more powerful? Or is it usually actually depleting its power by using it? I like to include little flourishes to items that make the players know that this thing is a powerful magical item and that there's perhaps reasons why these things should not be taken lightly. First off, magic is the definition of unnatural. The sentient magic item is not really a living thing, it's an artificial intelligence, really, it's a construct. If a whole mind is trapped inside an object, who knows what sort of insanity that could cause? The item may be absolutely desperate to achieve some personal goal, and it might be both very sad or very crazy, or both. For example, what if the magic sunblade that the party paladin has been using, which has been serving her faithfully for several months, but it's been letting them know that it really wants to return to the capital city and see the royal procession at the start of the summer season, as is the tradition for many years. The paladin just happens to be headed that way along with the party, and as the journey unfolds, the sword starts to talk about memories of past processions, and the paladin realizes that this sword has not been to a procession since the usurper murdered the last royal family, and the city is not actually the capital anymore, but the new royal family stages a procession of those who are to be executed for crimes against the state at the start of the summer through that place in a mockery of the old royal procession. Tricky! The paladin now has a moral dilemma that may result in the sun sword going insane. What do you do? One creepy item I included in a previous campaign was a necromantic tome. These necromantic tomes, which are actually created by necromancers by forcing a victim to read specific books and scrolls, lots of them, then murdering them, removing their and preserving and reanimating the head and putting it on a shelf with many other heads. The only thing that the head can do is remember the last thing it read in great detail and on command recite any and all of it to those who ask. Considering how much information a brain can contain, this is again a great example of not reinventing the wheel. A condemned criminal who is due to be put to death anyway still has a lot of useful brain meat for the local necromancers. The notion of Karnath in Eberron is likely to have whole libraries who make use of necromantic tomes. I'll talk a bit more about Karnath in future videos because it's one of the excellent locations in Eberron. What if some other necro-artificer made a self-reloading crossbow that fused bone, leather and undead muscle? But, back onto my point, I like to add little flourishes that are perhaps an imperfection in the magic items, some sort of a leak of the magic that they contain. For example, resting the necro crossbow next to your lunch and a pack of iron rations might cause it to spoil over the course of several hours or days. A fey flute with the sentience of a playful pixie might manifest the hidden mournful side of its captured personality in nightmare-infused dreams, where those who sleep close to the flute spend their night wandering through a forest made of carved stone, with every animated Every animal twisted and contorted in shapes of pain and suffering, and on the cold wind is the distant sound of an anguished crying, which is actually the other half of the trapped personality of the pixie, which is never allowed to express itself through the magical flute. So, the player would probably ask if this results in any sort of disadvantage in terms of game stats, but it need not be expressed that way, and if they find the experience to be suitably interesting, they'll take over the narrative for their own character, and in the game, they'll impose their own penalties on their character as they suffer from a depressed mood and a lack of a good night's sleep. Maybe some of the other characters get involved as well and say, do I have dreams like this? Well, how close are you sleeping to the flute? Pretty close. Okay, you have a dream like that. And so they all start to, get involved. Think about the source of the magic for the item. How would that be represented in a sort of a light and more story-based way? If it somehow leaked out of the item a little bit, what would the reaction of ordinary townsfolk be to some sort of strange occurrences around the characters that these amazing magical items they're just carrying around on their person all the time happen to manifest in the environment? One role-playing question I love to ponder is, what would the reaction of a Warforged be to an intelligent magical item? I mean, what a juicy situation to roleplay. What would your Warforged character think of a magical talking sword? Would they think of it as a trapped little buddy, Another thing to consider is that an item may have more than one intelligence inside it. A great example of this is items with dedicated powers. So they act one way most of the time, but when they are in pursuit of the item's specific purpose, a new personality takes over and unlocks far more power than the item previously allowed it access to. Perhaps the other personality in the item had no idea that there was additional powers that were locked up within this item that they could make available. So it's a great way to ensure that a magic item doesn't run roughshod over your campaign, as does making the use of the item limited in that it weakens and slowly expends the item's power. This can also be a tragic effect too. If you've grown close to the personality within the item, the more you use its magical powers, and it really wants you to use these magical powers, the closer it comes to, this personality leeching out of it as the magic no longer sustains it and it just turns back into a mundane sword or whatever other sort of item it is. You don't need to explain this to the players, but you do need to be consistent with whatever you do so that once the players learn something about the item, they can note it down and absolutely rely on that information in the future. This is the trust that they establish with the DM, and it's really your job to maintain and make sure that there's this consistency in your story and in your game world. So it's that mutual trust. I also think that in very special circumstances, there's nothing wrong with a player taking over the role of the magic item, as well as their character. Case in point, I had a character who had a magical sword. One of the powers of the sword is that it could swap places with the character. So now my character was a fighter named Sword who had an intelligent magic item with the personality of my other player character. This was huge fun, and I highly recommend giving it a go one day if you haven't already. Also, how about a magical sword that has a permanent unseen servant spell cast on it, and the sword projects an illusion over the servant that makes it look like an actual person is carrying it around and interacting with the world. But it's actually the sentience contained within the sword, and that persona, that visage, is what they used to look like. This works very well for a good guy, but also a very nasty bad guy, I should add. There are a bunch of tables you can choose from or roll on the random results from the Roll20 page. The special purposes table gives 10 different goals that the item may be dedicated to, such as being a glory seeker looking to acquire renown as the greatest magic item in the world by establishing its user as a famous or notorious figure. This is great because they leave the specifics entirely up to you, the DM, to insert the item into the tapestry of your fantasy world, how you fit. Also, the conflicts a character can get into with a sentient item can be a lot of fun. If something is frustrating for the player, it's your job as the DM to know when to push it a little and when to back off and make sure that all the effort that with the weapon really does pay off for the player. I suggest you have moments where that item really shines, where using that magical item is the key point in that entire encounter, which really makes it worthwhile having it and putting up with all of its antics. I mean, magic items are one of the coolest things about Dungeons and Dragons. They really need to be driving your story, not just random game mechanic accessories with no more to them than their market value. That's really doing a disservice. Why was the One Ring so interesting in Lord of the Rings? Not because it could turn the wearer invisible, that's pretty ho-hum. I mean, it's interesting and everything, but it was because it messed with the minds of everyone who interacted with it. It didn't even talk, it just made people obsess over it, and damn near brought down the greatest kingdom of humanity in Middle-earth as a result. If I tell my players that the item speaks to them, they roll their eyes somewhat. They've been down that road with me a number of times and are justifiably biased against sentient and yappy magic items. This is my own fault, I freely admit it. But if they pick it up and that item and I say, oh, your character loves this thing, they love it. They get this gleam in their eye for the exact opposite reason to their aversion for talking magic items. They love items that have the curse of avarice and obsession placed on them. Why? Why do they love that sort of item more? Because I'm not in charge of what is about to happen to them. They are. All of a sudden, they are asking themselves what their character would do if this item was the most wonderful thing in the world to them. Their treasure, their only love, their precious. It is a rich role-playing opportunity and it's never failed to be absolutely hilarious at my gaming table. I recommend you give it a go. Items that communicate in unusual ways are also really great fun. For example, an invention of my friend Ian, a great DM, a pair of magical goggles that were invented by the gnomish wizard and demigod Brubaliblish, has an enchantment of true seeing placed on them. But instead of just showing things as they were, what they displayed were all these little smiling imps that would fly around and point at things that were not as they seemed, shaking their heads. It was hilarious, kind of a super useful but slightly less functional magical item. With this alteration, the imps could convey additional information by silently pantomiming actions such as pull this out and lift this up to deactivate the trap, and so on. It was very, very gnomish, and it was one of the most memorable things of that campaign, along with the bowstring of wonder. I'll probably talk about that later on. No doubt I will have a lot more to say on the subject of magic items and magic in future rambles. If you love this sort of video, please let me know by giving it a click on the thumbs up icon. Absolutely let me know in the comment section about your favorite magic item from your story or your gaming history and experience. You know, I love to see what everyone else gets up to in their games and steal all their best ideas. Honestly, people, if you don't get as much out of the comments of my videos as from the videos themselves, you've not been getting the full benefit of having a fantastic community on this channel that's grown up over the years. I really recommend you read through the comments and interact with everyone as much as I do. It's hugely rewarding. Be sure to subscribe and get notified as I upload more than most channels of this variety, with weekly videos on monsters, exotic locations, rambles like this one about D&D, and 2 weekly live streams here on YouTube where you can ask me anything about Dungeons & Dragons. I also have a Discord channel, some snazzy merchandise for the dashing DM, and a link to my Patreon page. For just a minimum of $1 you can support me directly if you like my content, and patrons get access to special perks, of course, if they want to make use of them. As always, thanks for listening everybody. I'll be back with more for you very soon.